Berserk is my favorite series, so I always wanted to make content on it once I finished the other projects I'm working on now. And that was the plan. But due to what's been going on in the newest chapters, I felt like I needed to make this video sooner rather than later. And I'll just cut right to it. I'm making this video because there are two major things in the newest chapters that I think are bad, which after seeing, make me concerned for the future of Berserk. As a disclaimer, it is not the intent of this video to make light of or disparage the hard work of Mori or Miura's assistants. They have my utmost respect for willingly picking up one of the most critically acclaimed manga ever and attempting to finish it. I'm not one of those people who believes Berserk should have never been touched. I think it was a good idea to finish it, and I was very excited to see that it was continuing. But when it comes to writing and storytelling, I like to be fair. Just because Miura's assistants and his best friend are now in charge, which is a very meaningful gesture, doesn't mean it excludes them from critical discussion. Avoiding discussion and kind of tippy-toeing around stuff because Miura is no longer with us is disrespectful to the people working on the series now, and it creates an air of toxic positivity that I think is best avoided. There have only been several new Berserk chapters, which is a small sample size for sure, and I debated on waiting longer to make this video so that it didn't feel premature, but I don't think waiting longer would change anything that I have to say. So, let's begin. The two issues that I have can be boiled down to this: idea and execution. When it comes to the decision to end this arc the way it did, one of the questions that popped into my mind was this Miura's vision? Heading into the future, I think this is probably going to be one of the unfortunate consequences of Berserk's serialization without Miura. Anytime something funny happens, it's going to be hard not to ask yourself that question, and that's just something we have to deal with. Obviously, I don't know the answers because I'm not involved in the process, but I 100% believe that this was in fact Miura's idea. I buy into the belief that Elfhelm was always supposed to end with Casca being captured. Mori came out and said that Miura told him the outline for the story of Berserk, and from Mori's own mouth, Berserk hasn't strayed away from that outline. So it makes sense that something like this would happen. And for better and for worse, I think we all know how much Miura liked to put Casca in this type of scenario. She has always been a damsel in distress. This idea, despite me believing that it is Miura's, is still something I wholeheartedly disagree with. On my list of possibilities for how Elfhelm was going to conclude, bar unrealistic things like Casca being raped again, her being captured was my worst case scenario, and I'll explain why. The plot of Berserk since Conviction has been to rescue Casca, and it's taken on a couple forms, rescuing her physically and then mentally. As I mentioned, Casca being a damsel is nothing new to the story. One of the reasons why Casca is my favorite female character is because of that aspect and how it's used to progress the plot and characters of the story. There was a bit of a different connotation to it post-Golden Age because Casca as a character was at a standstill. She was incapable of progressing because of the way her mind was. There are times when I think Miura went too far with how he used Casca, but overall, I think he did a great job at utilizing her with farness and guts. Casca has spent a very long time, much longer than her being normal, as Elaine, which is one of the reasons why the quest to restore her mind carried weight. At long last, Casca was restored to normal. Well, kinda. Her relationship with Guts is still fractured, which is great because it leaves a lot of room for development, but relatively speaking, Casca's normal. Miura even gave her that little fighting sequence to say, "I'm back." To bring Casca back, to then immediately have her captured is very jarring. As readers, we didn't even get to see Casca do anything. In short order, she woke up, walked outside, and got yoinked, which effectively extends the same plot out even further than it already was, that of trying to rescue Casca. Even though, as I've said, Casca being a damsel is no surprise, there is a fine line, a balance, in how long you can continue to do the same thing over and over again before you go too far. And what's happened here with Casca is an instance of things going too far for me. One of the reasons I love Berserk is because of the suffering and the shit that my favorite characters go through. It makes me feel for them on a deeper level. But there's a time and a place for all things. I'm not happy at Casca being taken away here simply because it equated to Guts being a sad boy. Even though what happened here may fall in line with the story from a logical standpoint, it doesn't mean it makes me happy, it makes me satisfied. From a storytelling point of view, it's more of a letdown than it is dramatically cathartic. The prospect of Guts and Casca potentially not seeing each other again for a long time doesn't give me that Berserk feeling where it's a good kind of suffering. We've already had stuff like this happen numerous times. This was a good point in time to move in a new direction. I would rather see Casca with the group and Guts over the next however many chapters being together more than being separated. I would like to see Guts and Casca grow together so they have some time under their belt heading into the story's end. If Casca is to be captured, ultimately, I would have preferred it to happen at a later point so that I can be more happy about what the character's done prior to that. Much as I've said, this is all me disagreeing with the story's idea for how to move forward. But the process of storytelling incorporates two fundamentals. Even though there are ideas I'm not particularly fond of, like this one, a lot of how I feel is reliant on how it's executed. And this is where we get into my second and most important issue with the recent Berserk chapters. The thing that really makes all the difference: the execution. How something happens can be as important, if not more so, than what happens. For as much as I believe that Casca being captured is 100% Miura's idea, I also believe 100% that a lot of story elements fell through the cracks here, and what happened is nowhere near as good as it was originally intended to be. Which, if true, means that things kind of land at the feet of Mori and company for why. Let me lay things out so I'm making some sense here. At the end of Conviction, in an interview, Miura stated the following in regards to Guts and Griffith's relationship. I basically see it as the beginning of the relationship between the two of them having become adults. And also, the demon child that Casca gave birth to is going to become something of a key point. The adult aspect of this is pretty important. In the process of Guts vowing to never abandon Casca again, he stopped himself from going after Griffith. He stopped himself from succumbing to his base desires. Guts changed over time. He matured. He began to slowly heal, even as his relationship with Casca diminished. He became the leader of his own squad. He learned to trust people other than himself, to open up more. Guts became an adult. And so did Griffith, in a sense. Griffith let Guts and Casca on the Hill of Swords go with no ill will, and moved on to getting his own kingdom and following his dream. He came to terms with his becoming a demon. But that didn't mean Griffith or Guts stopped thinking of each other, or the past. Guts' psyche gave birth to the Beast of Darkness, the embodiment of his rage because he wasn't going after Griffith. And here in Elfhelm, we see Guts, in a way, still admires Griffith for his ambition. He still remembers what it is that enchanted him about him that long ago. But he's conflicted in what he wants to do with his hatred and feelings. And Griffith is similar, as evidenced by his run-in with Rickert, which showed that Griffith isn't as stone cold as he may have wanted to come across. Feelings still lurk beneath him. The relationship between Guts and Griffith, already one of the most dynamic relationships ever, evolved. It went beyond what it was before, which really set the stage for what would happen if they met again. And all of that leads me back to the execution of the newest chapters and how they contrast with what Miura left us. Miura left us with that amazing sequence with Griffith, as he transformed out of the Moonlight Child, saying, "I had a dream, under the full moon. I was a child embraced by nostalgic warmth. But, when I wake from the dream, only a vague sense of longing remains. That too will soon disappear with a single tear, like morning dew." This was the beginning of another confrontation between Guts and Griffith as adults. Griffith began things in the flowery and poetic way that we would expect. But then, for 4 chapters in a row, Griffith and Guts say nothing to each other. There is zero dialogue. Griffith said those words, which to me seemed like they were the beginning of something else, to then say nothing. And Guts, who had been in conflict about his feelings towards Griffith, instead of first attempting to confront him verbally or be confused about the Moonlight Child, immediately succumbed to his rage. Let's ask the question. After spending all of this time in conflict concerning Griffith, should the first thing that happened here be Casca screams, Guts gives in, and charges him? I know we've seen Guts go berserk 100 times, but would you say that's what should have happened here? Personally, I don't think so. To have this meeting happen without there being any dialogue feels wrong. I'm sure in due time we'll learn about Griffith's motivations and reasons for capturing Casca, but the act of capturing Casca does not advance the dynamic between Griffith and Guts. With no dialogue or nuance, all this is a plot device to move the story forward. The relationship between Guts and Griffith, if anything, regressed in this moment. This isn't the meeting of these characters as adults, and that's very important to me. Berserk at its core is a story about Guts and Griffith, and the fact that nothing happened in these chapters to push that forward makes me curious. It makes me look at things in a bit of a different light. Looking at these new chapters, I can't help but think that this isn't really how things were supposed to go. It makes me want to ask questions. The questions of, were Mori and company afraid to write dialogue between Guts and Griffith? Was this moment too big? Or is what Mori said in his letter to the fans really true? That he would not add anything to the story that he didn't know for sure. And maybe, since he didn't know for sure how the exchange between Griffith and Guts was supposed to go here, he didn't include it. I'm sure in the outline of the story that Miura gave Mori, it was more than likely just an outline of plot events. And since Mori didn't really know how the details were supposed to mesh together, instead of putting the pieces together himself, could it be possible he simply directed a sequence that led to the same outcome? If Elfhelm was always supposed to end with Casca being captured, and that's what Mori knows, maybe the simplest thing for him to do was to just craft a tale where Griffith comes, he gets Casca, and he leaves. As simple as that. I want to elaborate on what makes me think things didn't go as they should have here. So far we have the missing dialogue between Guts and Griffith, but there's more. In an excerpt from an interview with Miura in 2019, he said, "However, it is true that the first serious duel with Griffith is approaching." When Miura spoke of this duel, there is no doubt in my mind that this was supposed to happen in Elfhelm. This was it. This is the first meeting between Guts and Griffith in a long time. And Guts did try to hurt him in, Mori's vision of it. But was this a serious duel? Like how Miura hinted at. And I'm not talking about this from a power point of view. Guts, no matter how things would have progressed, Miura, no Miura, doesn't matter. Guts was always going to be insignificant compared to Griffith. What I'm talking about is from a narrative point of view. Was this a big confrontation between the characters? Was it meaningful? And what did it mean if it was? Is it in any way similar to any of the encounters they've had before? Their first two duels? The Hill of Swords? Not in my opinion, but it should have been. Because as of right now, there seems to be a large, looming plot thread that almost seems like it got dropped. Do you remember these words? No one will be able to prevent that moment. You will find yourself consumed by me. May we run rampant with hatred and wild joy, just to crush with these fangs the true light that burns us. But for now, I'll obey. I'll hold my breath deep in the darkness within us, bound, restrained, and then, someday. It is a writing promise, foreshadowed, guaranteed, that Guts will one day lose himself to the Beast of Darkness. And it's also hard for me to believe that the moment for this wasn't supposed to come in the encounter here with Griffith. It makes far too much sense for this to have been the moment. It's the ideal scenario. There was a lot of build up to it. The Beast said, keep your friends close, it's all the more to lose. Serpico was worried about Farnese staying with Guts because he's afraid that one day the Berserker armor may be responsible for her death. Guts then almost lost himself in the Sea God arc and almost attacked his friends. But he didn't because the Moonlight Child was there. That was also the last time Guts used the Berserker armor in combat. Guts wearing the Berserker armor continually saps away his health and it gets worse with each usage. Curiously, we always see the Moonlight Child around the Berserker armor, inspecting it, as if that might be important. Here in Elfhelm, there was an obvious storytelling attempt to introduce the concept of Guts needing more power-ups. His meeting with Hanar showed that the Berserker armor can be mastered. The obvious writing line with this would be, Guts encounters Griffith, they talk, things escalate, Guts completely loses himself to the Beast of Darkness like it was foreshadowed, but there's no Moonlight Child to help. Shurka is incapable of helping either. Guts is far gone. Then, Guts horribly loses in his fight against Griffith, and Casca is taken. It all falls in line with the story and would have made things come across so much better. All the more to lose. You lose Casca, and you lose your senses. Miura even reminded us of this in his last chapter about Guts' failing physical condition, as well as the Berserker armor. This seemed like it was primed to be the ultimate defeat, but with a tinge of hope like there always is. Since Guts would completely lose control, it would cement the need, the agency in his character to master it. And it would also show him that he's not as far away from Griffith as he might think. He did manage to take a hair off of him. All of these concepts are absent here in the confrontation with Griffith. Well, I guess not completely absent, but mostly. When Guts immediately loses himself to rage, we see the beast begin crawling up his cloak like it always does, primed and ready to take control. But seems like the puppy got lost. The beast doesn't take control of Guts at all, even though Griffith's right there. There's even a panel of Griffith being able to sense the beast as well, but Guts still doesn't go berserk. Yeah, I mean, he's gone berserk for a lot less. Is it possible that I'm just super wrong about all this? Did I misjudge when things were supposed to happen even though it seemed really obvious? Was the Beast of Darkness and the real confrontation between Guts and Griffith not supposed to be here? I don't know. This doesn't feel right to me. The execution is lacking. The meeting here with Guts and Griffith isn't up to par. It didn't give me that warm, fuzzy Berserk feeling, you know? It makes me question Berserk's future. At the end of the day, this is a big miss to me. What we just went over, to me, was a huge, important, and obvious conclusion to the arc. Elfhelm has some of my favorite moments in the story, but without all of this to tie it together, I'm not sure how I feel about it now. Skull Knight kinda did nothing, Danon sat in a corner in fear. I don't know. And at this point you may ask, well, heading back to Casca, what else did you think was going to happen? You didn't like the idea of her being taken away, but acknowledged that it was on brand. I think there were alternatives. Casca came down and saw Griffith for the first time. Maybe she could have momentarily talked and been a part of a conversation. Casca has been blocking out a lot of her memories, and the last thing she remembered about Griffith was when he was imprisoned. As Elaine, Casca remembered Griffith, and didn't remember Guts. She reacted positively towards him. The same could have happened here. Maybe seeing the old Griffith would allow Casca to talk for a little bit before she remembers the eclipse, where she gets a vivid memory of the rape, and then completely loses it, unable to come to terms. That would have given the opportunity for something to happen between Guts, Griffith, and Casca that isn't just Casca screams, faints, and gets taken. It would have allowed for that dynamic between the characters to move forward in a nuanced manner. But I think you guys get the point. I want to end this video off on a positive note, a hopeful one. I still believe that everything here can be redeemed. And to follow this up, I'll give you another quote from Miura. I was also really moved by Casca's revival. The thing is, it'll be difficult for Casca from here on out. To fully revive, she has to analyze and understand what happened to her on her own terms. she has to face up to what Griffith and the demons did. Even though I disagree with Casca being captured, if her being captured leads to amazing character moments where Casca is at the forefront of the story in a manner that is more than just being a damsel in distress, where Casca starts getting things that make up for all the time she's essentially missed in the story, and also assuming that the Beast of Darkness and Guts and Griffith stuff is properly handled, then I guess I'll feel different than how I feel now. At the end of the day, what we're talking about here is just my concerns. I know that Mori and the assistants aren't Mira, and they will never be Mira. No one will. They aren't going to do the exact same things he would have done. I've already accepted that. But accepting change doesn't mean I'll just ignore stuff, you know? I still want storytelling to take into account what's already happened and to work with that into the writing. I think Mori and the assistants show a lot of promise, so we'll just need to see how things pan out from here. I hope that everything that I mentioned ends up with me looking silly and worrying over nothing. But let me know if any of you felt the same way. Thank you for watching, and until next time, see ya.